And now it's time for Talking Trade with Sandi Siegel and Ken Wasley, sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin, Carroll University, and Michael Best Strategies.
Welcome to Talking Trade. I'm Sandi Siegel, CEO of Emmy Day and Company Customs Brokerage. I'm pleased to introduce our guest today, Brett Ewer. Brett's a principal with Michael Best Strategies, a Washington-based government relations professional who advises manufacturers, trade associations, and other organizations on federal trade policy, tariffs, supply chain issues, and advocacy before Congress and the administration. So we're happy to have Brett today and draw on his experience in government relations, public affairs, and being on Capitol Hill. So welcome, Brett. Great to have you on Talking Trade.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about some of the exciting activity in tariffs. Most of our trade friends and people understand that there's been a lot of talk about the Supreme Court decision that invalidated and stopped the IEEPA reciprocal tariffs and the other IEEPA tariffs. But while that was great news, it seems like quickly there were other new tariffs that replaced them, and a lot of activity in Washington looking for other ways to recover those tariffs. So I want to talk a little bit about that. One of those tariffs that almost immediately got imposed after the IEEPA was found unlawful was a Section 122 tariff, something that the president did have an authority to implement for trade imbalance of a straight 10% across all countries. But that's temporary unless it's renewed by Congress, and it's due to expire July 24th. So tell me your thoughts about that. What are you hearing in Washington on will it get renewed and extended? Is it even legal? There's been some talk that kind of stretched the rules on imposing it. What are your thoughts on that?
I have many. So I think it's safe to say that the 150-day period will not be renewed. Now, there had been some talk, I think there had been some whispers, perhaps, a statement hinting at this from the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, indicating that they could be reinvoked. But I think that that is highly unlikely. They will expire on July 24th, and Section 122 tariffs can be renewed through Congress, likely through something like a joint resolution. And I just don't think that the votes are there. And that's not really that's not a partisan issue. I think if you were to break it down by party, you'd have far more Republicans supporting the administration's actions. But many folks are on Capitol Hill, whether they're members of Congress or whether they're senators, even if they are publicly supportive, they understand the toll that tariffs take on their home states, on the economy in general, on consumers. So I don't think that the votes are there to renew them. Excuse me, to renew the Section 122
Right.
tariffs. I don't think that the vote would even be offered because I think it would fail. Uh,
Okay.
and there are some clear indications from last year. For example, there were some votes in the Senate on resolutions which disapproved of the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So, in short, I don't think that they're going to be reinstated, and I think the administration knows that.
Okay. Well, good news to someone who, supports free trade.
Mhm.
And I certainly, as you said, I think people are recognizing the impact of some of these tariffs and how it's affecting the economy and many businesses here. But in spite of all that, there, as I said before, there just seems a lot of focus on other legal ways of implementing tariffs and right or wrong, perhaps trying to correct some of the imbalance there, or concerns we have with business and trade with other countries.
Yep.
So there's been a ramp up of 301 investigations, which, for those that don't know, right, is the legal investigation period on various topics, various countries and issues, with the correct findings that allows the government to impose additional tariffs. So, two of the big ones that we're hearing a lot about of impacting our customers are countries that have forced labor, and then 301 investigations on the digital service taxes because of countries imposing those on US digital services. So, all of these new tariffs, right, and these new proposed tariffs. What's all the rumble again in Washington and what you're working on, and how is this impacting imports and exports?
Everyone is waiting, I think, right now with bated breath for the expiration of the 122 tariffs on July 24th. And before that, we're all expecting that USTR excuse me, the United States Trade Rep is going to come out with a determination, a final determination that forced labor is occurring in almost, I think it's 60 countries. It's about 99% of our imports are coming from these 60 countries, and that they will finalize duty rates of between 10% and 12.5%. Everyone, that is the received wisdom. That is baked into what everyone is expecting before the 122 tariffs expire. So everyone's eyes are on those. Digital service taxes are also important, and policymakers are focusing on those, whether they're in France or Canada or Korea. That still remains a priority. But right now, everyone's pretty fixed on the forced labor determinations and the excess capacity
So when we talk about the
determinations.
forced labor, historically, it's been focused on a lot of specific industries, right? Textiles, wearing apparel,
Yep.
furniture industry and so forth. But it seems, at least from my perspective, wider range now, and that if I'm understanding correctly, if there's any findings of forced labor in a country, now we're just going to, not focus on a specific, tariff for that commodity, but to the country. Like, here's your punishment because you have some forced labor activity. Is that a fair
I,
interpretation?
I think it is. The
Yeah,
proposed tariffs are expansive,
yeah,
uh, and and obviously because a 301 tariff has to have an investigation behind it, it can't
right.
be purely arbitrary. I think someone could say that the IEEPA tariffs were in large part arbitrary, and I think the court, in a sense, ruled on that. Um, but for the 301 tariffs, they are expansive, and some might argue that they're pretextual, that they are there because they're on firmer legal footing, but that they still need to get to that 10% minimum rate because we know that the 122 tariffs are going to expire, so there needs to be some other authority to back that up.
Right. Okay. And certain lobbying groups that you're hearing from on how it's, affecting imports and exports?
Absolutely. It is
Yeah.
a feeding frenzy. We're in the piranha pool right now. Everyone is trying to get a bite. And on one side, I think you tend to have um, folks with distributed supply chains, including manufacturers, who understand that yes, the promise of bringing back domestic manufacturing is alluring, but there's also uh, the supply chain is global. I mean, for better or for worse, everyone is relying on inputs from all around the world, even if the manufacturing is happening in Wisconsin or Minnesota
Yes.
or Iowa. Um, but so that's one side. And then I think the other side, you have a lot of folks in the agriculture industry who really want to make sure to maintain stability in commodities markets in the U.S. and to make sure too that the commodities that they're selling are going to be both affordable but also profitable. I mean, farms need to be able to exist as a going concern. So they're going to be focusing on things like dairy, avocados when it comes to Mexico, dairy for Canada. These are all ongoing. Beef, cattle ranchers are a huge presence in DC. So it is most certainly a feeding frenzy, and everyone's getting in on the action.
Okay. Yeah, as you say, it hits home in a great respect here in the Midwest. So let me, that transition that into talking about USMCA, concern about whether or not, that will be renewed. And again, that has impact, as you say, on dairy farmers, avocados, fruits,
Right.
various farmers and, you know, important for us both on import and export. So do you think is there something else out there, any trade agreements that the trade rep is working on in negotiating to replace USMCA or carving out some deals with our friends on either side of the border?
Yes. So USMCA, there was a decision point on July 1st, whether to renew it cleanly or whether to open it up and look at things like rules of origin
Okay.
for particular goods. And in July 1st, that deadline passed. So we're not having a clean renewal. So between the US, Mexico, and Canada, there will be for the next 10 years an annual review, after which in 2036, the parties can decide whether or not they want to maintain the agreement in its current form. And at any point, any of the parties with 6 months' notice can choose to withdraw. But what I expect to happen is that in the next couple of years, because there is no clean extension, we've passed that deadline, we're going to see new trade deals forged between US, Mexico, and Canada, a new trade deal forged between the three that really looks at things like country of origin rules. It's going to look at new rules for agriculture, for autos. The US's main goal in this, our main goal is to create a sort of North American manufacturing zone and limit the amount of Chinese origin goods that enter. So that's the US's main priority. As it relates to the annual reviews, I think we'll see a lot of activity in the first few years, and then that will mostly fizzle out. And it remains to be seen, whether there will be a more long-standing, long-lasting deal. And I know that that gives a lot of folks in the business community heartburn, understandably.
Right, right. Well, I've been in this long enough to remember the origin of NAFTA.
Right.
And, it was on the pretense that we collaborated as a
As a
continent
unit.
to
Yeah.
be more competitive with China and the rest of the world. And, obviously that objective has changed a little bit over the decades. So, well, thank you. That was really insightful because,
Thanks.
I've been getting a lot of questions on what's going on with NAFTA. Um, Brett, really helpful to, hear right from someone on the ground. I'm sure, things will remain active. There doesn't look like anything is going to calm down
There
in the
is
near term on tariffs and trade. So I hope we can have you back on Talking Trade and get your insight on
there
relevant
is
topics.
there is no shortage of activity, so I look forward to speaking with you again.
Terrific. Okay. Brett Ewer on Talking Trade, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Talking Trade with Sandi Siegel and Ken Waslick, sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin, Carroll University, and Michael Best Strategies.